Velkommen alle sammen til denne seansen på Litteraturfestivalen i Lillehammer. Mitt navn Tore Slåtta, og jeg sitter i rådet for denne festivalen. Og en av de hyggelige oppgavene vi får i den forbindelse at vi innleder på noen av disse seansene. Og it is my great pleasure today to introduce Antoine Compagnon, who has published a lot of books now recently that have been translated into Norwegian. And he is here to talk about his most recent publication in Norwegian, which is the Digital Melancholy, Digital Melancholy, and which was written in 2015 and translated to Norwegian this year. He's previously written international bestsellers that are a bit strange or unusual in the international literary market because they are partly academic and still talking to a larger audience, which I think is interesting from an academic point of view. And not incidentally, these are also written in other or for other media. So it's a fantastic blend here in these books from radio talks, from internet blogs, and from literature, classic literature, and also research, I'd say. So it's a good blend of various literatures that comes together in his books. For instance, in The Summer with Prost from 2014, and The Summer, which was the other one? The Summer with Montagne, and also now in Digital Melancholy. Compagnon is professor at Collège de France from 2006, and also now at the Columbia University in New York. So I think we should give him a welcoming applause, and please, Antoine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I'm glad to be in Lillehammer today and to speak to you about those digital melancholy. Well, let me first say why I wrote that book and how it came about, and then we will see what we will do. So this was a blog initially, as you said, a blog in the Huffington Post, which is an online publication, and they started a French version a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2012 or 2013. And at that point, they asked me, the French, the two French directors of that new media, if I wanted to have a blog on the Huffington Post. And it was a time when I thought it would be interesting and apropos to study or to explore the consequences of the digital culture on our life, all aspects of our life, public and private, professional and personal. It's something that I had been wanting to do for a while, to try to measure the changes for someone of my generation who belongs to a classical culture. I'm a classical scholar, a professor of literature, which I've done for more than 40 years. But my life, both professional and personal, has been changed since the mid-1980s to... it still changes all the time. And so I started this blog, and I gave myself a sort of discipline. I mean, I think we need discipline. Baudelaire said that we can't do nothing without discipline. And the discipline was to write a short blog each week, so that I would be in fact, attentive to what went on in my digital life. I thought that if I didn't do it on that sort of regular basis, I wouldn't notice those minor and major changes. But of course, some of them will sound minor, and in fact, they are not minor at all. And I did that for 2 seasons, I stopped in the summer because I thought I needed some rest, and we need some rest from the digital world. We need to turn off the smartphone and the rest for a while in the summer. And in fact, I mention it in the book. And after 2 seasons, I stopped because I thought it became repetitive. I thought I'd gone the full circle and explored what seemed important at the time. But of course, it changes very fast. One of the first consequences of the digital world is speed and the speed of change. When I started as a scholar and as a writer and a teacher, I had a typewriter. I started with a typewriter. In fact, the typewriter had been given to me by Roland Barthes. I discussed this in another book. He gave me his electric typewriter. It was an Olivetti, a very good brand, because he had bought it and he could never master it. Whenever he touched a key, it would start as there would be 10 or 12 S instead of 1. I thought it was very strange because Barthes was a very good pianist, as you might know, and I thought that his fingers should have been delicate, but he could never master his electric typewriter, so he gave it to me, and he got rid of it by giving it to me, but in fact it was a very beautiful gift because he gave me an instrument which lasted I think 12 years, and with which I wrote probably 3, 4, 5 books. My first, it never broke down in those 12 years once. It didn't work, and I simply had it cleaned. There was dust between the keys. So in 12 years, it was very faithful, this typewriter. And then I moved to the United States. This was in 1985, and that's why I can date the first computer I bought was when I arrived in New York, teaching at Columbia in 1985. Of course, it's a brand that no longer exists because, as you know, there is a rule which is destructive creation, Schumpeter's rule. So since then, I think I've changed the computer at least every 2 years. Since 1985. I can't remember how many computers I've had. Coming here, I was thinking that, for instance, one of the things that I loved about the digital world was my first digital camera. I had a couple of digital cameras, and then they are dead. Nobody now travels with a digital camera because we have cell phones that are so much better. And I don't know why we call them phones, because we never give phone calls with these devices. As you know, we were discussing this at lunch. We never phone anymore. The phone is dead, the notion of the phone. The smartphone is, in fact, a computer, and we use it to text, to exchange data, but we rarely call any longer. So the notion of speed is very important in this world, and of course it changes all the time. And I probably could start again a new blog with everything that has been taking place since I stopped I don't want to say that the book is outdated, because it records an important moment in our lives, probably a moment when the changes were most brutal. But for instance, since then I bought this Apple Watch, which is a nice toy, which didn't exist when I wrote the book. I think I mentioned in the introduction that it's the next device I will buy, because probably I like those devices. I am a literary scholar, but I started as an engineer, so I still like technology, and and I like to control technology, to be. Once I said, I think I mentioned it in the book, I like to feel that I'm inside the computer. The way you are inside a problem of mathematics. When you solve a problem of mathematics, you live within the problem or within the computer. Why did I say that? Yes, I said that because then I bought this watch a couple of months ago. And the first lecture I gave with that watch, there was a huge problem. All the while, when I was speaking with giving the lecture, my arm kept shaking. Every couple of minutes, there were vibrations in the watch. And I couldn't do anything because I was speaking. I couldn't understand what was going on. And after the lecture, an old friend came to me and said, "What happened to you? Your arm was shaking all the time during the lecture." And there was a journalist in the audience who was tweeting every couple of minutes what I was saying. So once you have an Apple Watch, you need to know that before giving a lecture, you have to put your phone on airplane mode so that it won't give you these sorts of appearance of Parkinson's disease when you give a lecture. So you see, I could probably start it again. As I said, it's, yes, I probably love these devices, and at the same time, the title of this book, in particular in French, is a reference to Baudelaire. The French title is Petit spleen numérique. Numérique is the French for digital. I realize that in Norwegian you say digital, as in English. In French we have a word for digital, which is numérique. But unfortunately, this word is now disappearing more and more. People say, young people say digital instead of numérique, because I guess it's more fancy, more English. But we have numérique, so Petit spleen numérique is a reference to Baudelaire. Baudelaire wrote these prose poems called Petits poèmes en prose, short prose poems. And then there's an alternative title for this book by Baudelaire, which is Le spleen de Paris, Paris spleen. So Petit spleen numérique is a contraction of Paris spleen and short prose poems. And perhaps because I wanted to emulate Baudelaire's attitude to modernity, Baudelaire being the inventor of the notion of modernity, the word modernité, and also being a virulent critic of the new world that he was experiencing. Baudelaire lived through the first industrial revolution. We are living the third industrial revolution. So Baudelaire was keenly aware of the changes. It is important to remember that Baudelaire was born in 1821. The press, the newspaper, was invented in 1836. The first two newspapers with a large size and large numbers, with publicity and with serial, both started in 1836 in Paris. So he was 15 when this huge change took place. And we know what are the changes now that are going on in the press, as major as the ones he experienced as a teenager. And the idea of thinking of Baudelaire as a teenager is strange, but still, he was a teenager when the press was invented. He was a teenager when photography was invented, 1839. Can you imagine the sort of drastic revolutions that these two inventions were? It's like Baudelaire said that religion, the invention of photography is, it's like the end of monotheism. It's like a return to paganism and to the cult of the image, of the multiple images. So he considered that it was, yes, a huge change. So, and his attitude is both of curiosity. Nobody mastered those new. We should remember that Baudelaire poems were published on the cheap paper of the press. When we think of poems, we think of a generally beautifully printed book on white and rich paper. But Baudelaire's idea was to have his poems printed in the daily press. When you touch it, your fingers are black with ink and dirty, and this is what he wanted. Of course, his attitude to photography was very ambivalent, as it was towards the press. So what I was interested in let's say, emulating Baudelaire's attitude was having both this curiosity and distance. I think that we need irony. Irony. It's another Baudelaire word. Modernity and irony. Conquer irony in our relationship with modernity, in our relationship with the digital world. So we are experiencing those changes that are drastic, and in relationship with them, I think we need to live with them and at the same time have some distance. And as I suggested, it seems to me that for someone of my generation, the digital revolution was all good, in the sense that as someone of my generation belongs to a previous culture, the culture of the book, the culture of the pen, even before the typewriter, even though I'm not sure I could be able today to write an article with a pen. I would probably not be able to do it. In the book, one of the blogs is about finding the last manuscript of an article that I wrote by hand. And I tore it and threw it away when I found it. And it was a sort of a lost object of another world. So, as I said, for someone of my generation, it seems that it gave us new powers, new potentials, but that we didn't lose much. I don't think that we lost much of that was given to us as a new instrument. It's very difficult to say what the consequences will be on generations those that we call digital natives, who don't have this previous physical culture of the book and of writing with a pen. Let me go through a number of changes that are consequential and that deal with everything of our lives, professional and personal. The first should be, of course, reading. We read differently. I mean, we are at a book fair, so we probably are all aware of the consequences and of the changes that the digital world has brought to reading. We read more and more. In fact, everybody reads more and more. As I said earlier, we no longer talk on the phone. Instead of talking on the phone, we write and read text messages all the time. And when I see my text messages, when they come back, and I realize all the spelling mistakes that I have done, writing too fast those messages. I am a professor at the Sorbonne, and I make terrible spelling mistakes when I write text messages. I'm ashamed, but I think that we all do. Just a couple of days ago, I sent a message, and so it came back with the response, and I noticed that I had forgotten the agreement of the participe passé, which in French is really, I mean, it's like the Ten Commandments to make a mistake in a past participle. I was so ashamed. But nevertheless, as I said, we read and we write more than ever, but of course in a very different fashion. I don't know what's the penetration of the digital book in Norway, but you will probably tell me. In the United States, it's about 20%. 20% of the library, of the bookstores, is digital. In France, it's much lower. It's about 6%. But what is also interesting in both cases is that it's no longer increasing at the rate of the first couple of years. Digital books started, it's not very recent. We are discussing phenomena that are really recent. The digital book started in 2008, roughly. In the book, I tell of the story of the first digital book that I bought, and which didn't have a happy ending, but this was my first experience. Since then, I've bought a number of digital books on Amazon and elsewhere. But when I was in New York last fall, there was a sort of controversy because it appeared that the percentage of the digital book hadn't increased in 2015. So it was, instead of increasing at a very rapid rate, it was stable at about 20%. And there were huge discussions on that issue. Was it correct? Was it not correct? Because, of course, there are a number of sectors in publishing, departments in publishing, where the penetration of the digital book is more than 50%. In medicine, in law, both in France and in the US. In France, where it's only 6% for... In France, it's 6% overall, but it's only 2% for literature. So you see that it remains very small, which probably can lead us to the idea that we will remain hybrid readers for a long time. We like to read both on a tablet for a number of things, and we still like to read books. And of course, we're in a culture which this has been a big change since my generation. When I was a child, children's books were not quite as appealing as they are now. So children are introduced to a book culture that is very attractive, very beautiful, and very appealing. So they might lose that taste when they become teenagers, but children have all reasons to love books because they are given beautiful books. So in a way, this is a way to keep them in this relationship with the book, to have beautiful books. But I think that we all like to read a number of reading material on a tablet, and it seems to me that the future of newspapers is very different from the future of the book. The conversion to the digital format for newspapers is on its way. I think I said that yesterday in Oslo, but now I subscribe to Le Monde and the New York Times online, and I almost never buy a newspaper, a physical newspaper, any longer. When I do it, it becomes a sort of nostalgic pleasure. Yesterday, when I came to Oslo, my flight was 2 hours late at the airport in Paris, so I bought newspapers. And it's like a Madeleine, like a Proustian Madeleine, buying a newspaper, and the pleasure of reading it. But you see, we accommodate different functions through either the physical book or the digital book. Of course, one of the limits of the digital book is that we don't really own it. We cannot lend it, we cannot give it, and in fact, it's more like renting it than owning it truly. And I think it's one of the serious limits of the diffusion of the digital book. And if we only rent it, then it becomes too expensive. The difference in price between the digital and the physical book is not such that you will feel that you've been given enough if it's only renting it. And I was also saying at lunch when we discussed this that the digital books that I bought, I forget about them. I don't remember that I've read them or that I own them. They are in my tablet, and I'm not sure that I own them. Of course, it's very convenient with Amazon, because when you forget that you've already read a book and you try to read it because it comes back, they tell you, you have already bought this book 3 years ago. So then you feel a bit stupid, but at least you don't buy it a second time. Of course, they say this also when it's a physical book, but they keep, this is one aspect of the digital world that we should certainly evoke its relationship with memory, that everything that we have done and said and bought is somewhere memorized. So reading has drastically changed, of course, but perhaps literature hasn't changed yet as much. Digital books are mainly transcription of physical books, and we have a couple of examples of enriched books, but at this stage, I don't think we have seen what we might see in the future. Second change, I would say, in my life. So, as I said, up to now, it has only enriched my experience. My experience of reading has been enriched for people of my generation. I've lost nothing. And I'm able to, when I come here in my tablet, I have all the books that I need to work for next week, to prepare lectures, etc. So I have my own library that I carry around everywhere. So it's all good. Now, writing. Writing, as I said, I probably stopped writing by hand in 1985, which is a long time ago. And I wouldn't be able, as I said, to write an article. I take notes. I took notes to get this talk, but I never write a sentence. I take notes. It's extraordinary to think that I can no longer write a sentence by hand. I mean, I could if there was no electricity. If the strikes go on in France and we no longer have electrical power, I might try to write by hand. But it's only in extraordinary circumstances that this would happen. So when we started writing with a word processor in 1985 or so, what did it change? I had an editor, a publisher in Paris at Gallimard, Pierre Nora, the historian, who told me at the beginning, this must have been 15 to 20 years ago, that when he received the manuscript that had been produced with a word processor, he would immediately smell it, recognize that it was written with a word processor. And he said, and I said, why? Why? How would you recognize it? And he said, because it's shapeless. When it's written with a word processor, then you can expand anywhere, you can add, you lose the form, you lose the intention. It is the manuscript becomes a sort of monster. And we know this, that in a manuscript that we write on a word processor, we can always add and expand and lose the line of the argument. The argument is lost. And I remember telling Pierre Nora, but I'm sure you already received shapeless manuscripts before word processing was invented. And that, after all, authors that I admire, like Montaigne and Prost, the two other books on Montaigne and Prost, wrote as though they already had a word processor. Montaigne was adding marginalia all the time. When you read Montaigne, it's very difficult at times to understand the argument because the argument has been lost. So you have to subtract all the additions, and then you understand when there's a but, what it does oppose. But you really have to just take away all the additions to understand the structure of the text. And in Proust, as we know, Proust expanded his manuscript all the time until the day of his death. And the additions in Proust are those paperoles that can be 3 meters long. So in a sense, this is not really new. So one has to be very careful about suggesting that changes are revolutionary. I'm not sure that word processing was a revolution for my generation. Word processing can be used as an instrument towards brevity and not only towards amplification. When I had to write those short chapters on Montaigne for the radio, I was allowed to speak for 4 minutes. So I had to subtract a lot of, and reduce the talk to the bone. And nothing is better than word processing to reach that point. So it can be used as an instrument of brevity and not as an instrument of shapelessness. So we should be very careful about wary of dramatizing the consequences of these digital changes and revolutions. Not long ago, I was giving my lectures this year at the Collège de France on the figure of the rag picker in the 19th century. It doesn't seem to be connected to the digital world. But at some point I wondered, it had to do with paper, the invention of paper made of wood, and the rag picker was a major figure in the 19th century because there was a shortage of paper and education, culture was increasing, and And so at some point I thought, but paper was a major issue in the 19th century, all through the 19th century, until paper was made with wood. And I thought, but when was the metallic pen invented? I had no idea, absolutely no idea of when we started to write with a metallic pen. Again, something that took place when Baudelaire was a kid. The metallic pen was invented in 1830, replaced the quill for a long time. There was a shortage of quill in France and in Great Britain. It was imported from Russia. Of course, as you know, it's light. Quill is light, but still it was expensive. So people had been looking for an alternative to the quill, the metallic pen. But the metallic pen was durable, but not elastic enough. The elasticity was insufficient until someone had the idea of the hole in the metallic pen. And this was patented in Britain in 1830. And it was, it's as important a change as the computer, the invention of the metallic pen. It took over immediately. Baudelaire gave as a present to his mother's husband. His father had died, his mother was remarried. A metallic pen in 1832. British, so this, he was modern. He was modern. But it's strange to think that he already gave the metallic. Of course, writers never switched to the metallic pen. Baudelaire never wrote. After giving a metallic pen to his stepfather, he never wrote with metallic pen. Victor Hugo, who died in 1885, never switched to the metallic pen. The metallic pen was for the accountants, for Alexandre Dumas, who wrote serials, but not for Flaubert. Flaubert, on his desk, had a vase with 200 quills, and this was his fortune. So, and of course, at the time, there were articles that said that literature is dead because of the metallic pen. There was a whole campaign in the 1830s. This was the end of literature. Why? Because when you write with a quill, you have to sharpen your quill every once in a while, and it gives you time to think. With the metallic pen, people won't think. They will just write. And of course, after the metallic pen, the typewriter was invented, and then the computer, and literature isn't dead. So we should be careful about that. Nevertheless, one can wonder about the consequences of the fact that children in many American states in the United States no longer learn how to write longhand. They only write script, detached letters, and no longer cursive letters. Because it seems a waste of time to learn two handwritings. If you save one handwriting, you can probably do much better things with your brain. But these kids will never know how to write longhand any longer. Letters will be detached. For us, for me at least, people of my generation, letters are attached. And it's a different way of thinking. But as I said, I can no longer write sentences on paper, so it's probably pointless to be able to write. But we should be wary of making generalizations. Now, what other activities could I discuss? Teaching. Teaching, I'm a professor. Teaching has changed. Yes, has changed in a certain measure. Of course, teaching, the problem about teaching, I think, yeah, there were at least 10 points I wanted to discuss, but I'm slow. Yes, teaching. As an activity, has it really changed? Has it really changed? Teaching is a very special activity. Learning. There are no productivity gains in teaching. It takes the same time to learn how to write nowadays that it took generations ago. There's a similarity between the teacher and another activity where there are no gains of productivity, which is the hairdresser, the barber. If it goes faster, it's not well done. You can gain time only in price of quality. So in teaching, both in primary school and up to the university levels, it's very difficult to have productivity gains, which means that the salary of professors should go down all the time, because salaries are based on productivity. Salaries of professors and salaries of hairdressers should go down all the time. They don't, because they tend to be an equilibrium, but certainly they are paid less than they used to be. I won't say the contrary, but there is a reason for that. So for the last 20 or 30 years, there has been a quest for productivity gains in teaching. One of the ideas that was very popular a couple of years ago, I'm sure you discussed it in Norway also, were the so-called MOOCs, the massive open online courses that were introduced at Stanford University a couple of years ago. There are a couple of blogs on the MOOCs in that book, because I was by chance, I was one of the first to discuss them in France. And so the MOOCs was suddenly a huge productivity gain in teaching, because the first courses at Stanford, which was a course on robotics, I think there were, I can't remember the figure now, but it's 30,000 students in one class all around the world. So it was like a miracle in terms of savings. Of course, after a while, after a couple of years, it was realized that the MOOCs were successful only with students who already had a degree. It couldn't be introduced. The hope was to introduce the MOOCs for higher education, for instance, in Africa, where there are no universities. So instead of building brick and mortar universities, you could jump over that stage and go directly to a new technology. As in many countries in Africa, the stage of the telephone lines was overstepped immediately to go to cell phones. So we could avoid having to build universities. And we could democratize higher education through MOOCs. After a couple of years, the result is that MOOCs are mainly used for professional, continuous education, for people that are highly motivated and that already have a degree, so that they have learned how to learn by themselves. So it didn't lead to a democratization. So has it really changed? I think we have made marginal gains, but it still takes as long to learn how to read and write, and it takes as long to learn the mathematical operations. You don't save time in an electronic classroom in terms of getting to those goals. I should probably speak quickly of the more intimate aspects of the changes the digital world has introduced in our way of living, loving, all these aspects of daily life, the sort of control that we have on our daily life through these devices. My watch controls my every movement. At the end of the day, I know how many steps I've walked, how many calories I have burned, how many hours of sleep I have taken, deep sleep, etc. I can control all my life, which is a bit frightening, and as you know, might have consequences in terms of health insurance. Health insurances might know all the data about any individual before deciding which premium you will have to pay to get a health insurance. So our life has changed drastically in all of those aspects. And perhaps this should lead to something about perhaps the most, let's say, ethical or even ontological consequences. I mentioned a couple of times this infinite memory of data that are gathered and kept in servers that we don't know where they are exactly. Nothing is lost. We never lose anything. I remember when I first started using a computer, we would lose articles. We would start writing an article, and then suddenly the article was eaten by the computer or disappeared. We had forgotten to save, and it simply disappeared. So we rewrote the article, and it was generally better. It's always better when you do it a second time. And the memory at that time, you had your own memory. You possessed your memory, and you would rewrite, and if then, by chance, you found the first version, the second was better. But now, we never lose anything. It goes immediately to the cloud. The cloud keeps everything. You buy a new cell phone, and you find in your new cell phone pictures that you took years ago with not the previous cell phone, but 2 or 3 generations before. And this is all downloaded into your new device. Pictures that you forgot about people who died in between. And perhaps the digital world is changing the meaning of death. Can we die in the digital world? Can we die? Can a Facebook account die? A friend of mine told me a couple of months ago that after his father died, his father died, and he still had the email account of his father. He knew the password of his email account, of his father's email account. So once in a while, he would check his father's email account to see if there were important things. How long will he do? Will he go on doing that? Huh? An account is something that survives the death of the person. Someone else told me that looking at a Facebook account, he realized that the owner of the account, something had happened. Probably the owner had died. But still, comments were introduced. The account was alive. It leads us to questions about the meaning of life and death, memory and forgetting. Forgetting is important for memory. And now, even though there is in Europe at least, a right to, in French it's called droit à l'oubli. We can request on Google or that some mentions be forgotten. It will not be forgotten for everybody. What Google will cross out in Europe will still be in the servers in Iowa or somewhere. So there is no forgetting, no possibility of forgetting. And so we have to think of what memory is without forgetting. And we all have these two aspirations, an aspiration to forget and a desire to remember everything. And I guess the balance between the desire to forget and the desire to remember is different in every individual. We don't have the same. Perhaps some of us want to forget more than they want to remember, and others, and it's not the same equilibrium. But the digital world is a world where forgetting is disappearing, loss is disappearing. And this we didn't realize at first when we, let's say 20 years ago, we never thought of that, of these consequences which are very new, and perhaps they are not yet discussed in this little book, and it should be the next step. If I start again, as you see, there are a number of issues that I should deal with. Thank you. And I will answer questions if you have questions.
Som vil stille spørsmål?
I noticed in your book that you are positive to most of the digital gadgets and things that you try out, except with one exception, PowerPoint. PowerPoint.
Yes, there are a couple of blogs in that book on PowerPoint. I simply didn't mention PowerPoint here because I should have mentioned it when I discussed the MOOCs, because it has to do with teaching. Yes, it's interesting because the blogs I wrote about PowerPoint when it was on the Huffington Post were those that received most comments. People are really divided about PowerPoint. Some love it, some hate it. As I'm always a moderate, an Aristotelian in search for the juste milieu, the middle, the right, I use PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint in my lectures at the Collège de France. If you look at the lectures of the Collège de France, which are on podcast on the site of the Collège de France, I always use PowerPoint for quotations, for illustrations, images. But I think that most people really use PowerPoint too much. You see, once in a while, it's refreshing to give a lecture without PowerPoint, just to see if I can still do it. Because I suggested that I can't write an article without a computer. I think I can still give a lecture without PowerPoint. I'm not sure people of the next generation will be able to do it. I will give you an example. At the Collège de France, there is a ritual which is the inaugural lecture. The inaugural lecture is a serious moment. The professor who has been elected gives this lecture. All his colleagues are there in the first rows, and it's like a final exam. They are there to decide whether they made the right choice in selecting you. And now, if I could be a sort of tyrant of the Collège de France, I would forbid the use of PowerPoint in the inaugural lectures, because it makes them infantile. Inaugural lectures of the Collège de France. There are things that I hate about it. I mention it in the book, so I can repeat. When I read on the screen what the person is telling me, because you read faster on the screen than we speak. So, there's a sort of, we are already waiting for the next step while the person is too slow. So there are things, I say that, I give as an example the US Army in Iraq, where PowerPoint was forbidden because officers in the army in Iraq were fighting an imaginary war on PowerPoint. And they lost the real war while they were trying to conceptualize the war on PowerPoint. So yes, I love PowerPoint in my lectures, but I think there should be a moderate use of PowerPoint. But it's true that it's a question on which people have strong opinions. And as I said, I don't think it really it doesn't give productivity gains in education. Productivity gains are very hard to extirpate in learning. It's not the same in research. The research side of my profession, which I didn't mention, is so much more efficient in the digital world. When I did a critical edition of Proust in the early 1980s, before the computer, I could spend 3 weeks for one footnote. Now, you Google it, and you can do it at 3 in the morning when the library is closed. And the efficiency of scholarship, yes, there are huge productivity gains in scholarship. In fact, it's probably, there is no merit to be a scholar nowadays in literature. It's too easy. It's too easy.
Okay. Thank you very much, Antoine Compagnon. And I think you have proven the power of the word and also of literature, I think. It is a threatening time we're living in. And yes, since I've just resigned from a professorship at the University of Oslo, I thought you were saying some important things. There is a sort of loss also in academia at the moment, and there's a lot of melancholy going on and pain with all the technology changes that comes on. So thank you very much for giving us this wonderful lecture, and have a good time in Lillehammer.
Thank you.